It's the business of
life,
the business of
love,
the business of
health,
the business of
wealth.
It's the business of
Principle,
the business of
media,
the business of
conscious
the
black
business of
business
the business
network.
of the business of
Love,
the business of
Was that any conversation about psychological slavery, I think we have to understand that psychological slavery cannot currently be broken because the process of enslavement has itself not been broken.
But do we stand up as black men? They come into our communities, they beat our women, they beat our elderly, they beat our children, they beat us, they kill us, and what do? We don't fight back.
Are you thinking your thoughts or somebody else's thoughts? Most of the time, you're thinking somebody else's thoughts.
So the mind can rationalize, justify, or defend whatever one wants to do.
Stay in our place. The forces beyond us are making sure that we never really figure out who we are. And they will do anything they can to make sure that we never figure out who they are now.
And we say, I'm coming, no, I'm coming. We fight over that. And then I ask myself on my last level, why in the world would I want to be a little white boy?
Our adversaries have defined for us that a white coat wearing MD has your best interests at heart when it comes to your health, and that a herbalist or grandma's remedies is quackery.
Then it finally dawned on me. And it hits me like I get emotional about this. You know why? Because I didn't see people like myself in media.
Of course.
Bigger than and smaller than the institutions we're building. It is about the self.
I am we. Ubuntu. That's who we are. Us understanding and recognizing the human dignity that resides within African people is at the essence of what it means to be African. And we'll never defeat people who are spiritless if we don't take spirit into the battle.
So the theme for our third annual NTU Festival is breaking the chains of psychological slavery, reclaiming our minds, bodies, and spirits. And in this process of breaking these chains and reclaiming our minds, bodies, and spirits, other perspectives and viewpoints will be shared. So let us prepare ourselves for a very important and therapeutic and necessary dialogue to facilitate understanding and to help us come together as a people. Ashe? Ashe. Ashe. And so today, we have 9 distinguished panelists who are here with us. Some of you may know them, some of you may not know them or be familiar with the work that's what some of them may do in the community. And that is okay, because that's what I'm here for. Ashe? But nevertheless, everyone has a valuable contribution, and everyone has something to offer on the grand scheme of things in regard to what it's going to take for us to break these psychological chains of slavery and what is going to be necessary to be able to reclaim our mind, our body, and our spirit. All right? So, who we have here with us? We have Mama Kenyatta Moon, educator and founder of Instroma Academy, and you could wave, Mama, so everybody could be familiar with you if people don't already know who you are. You have Dr. Jared Ball, scholar, educator, and social-political commentator, Morgan State University professor, Dr. Jared Ball. We have Baba Imhotep Fatiu, first urban philosopher, author, and founder of Pan-African Liberation Movement. All right. We have Ishmael Murry, herbalist and certified holistic health practitioner and owner of Quantum Wellness Group, LLC. We have Dr. Max T. Ragland, who was an author and a psychotherapist. Let's give it up for him, family. We have Dr. Henry Gregory, psychotherapist, scholar, author, and owner of Rafiki Consortium, LLC. Let's give it up. Next up, we have our very own seafood, Ausar, Dennis Winkler Sr., who was the Baba, the father, the proud Baba of our very own Minister Ausar Dennis Winkler. He is a healing practitioner, martial arts instructor, and he is the founder of the Temple of New African Thought, Sokima, and that stands for Spirit of Kemet, Eternal Martial Art Academy. Let's give it up for Baba Ausar family. We have Mr. David Murphy, an activist and publisher of National Black Unity News. You may have seen, you may have seen some of his publication already distributed around our temple here today. Let's give it up for him. All right. And soon, he's on his way. He will be joining us soon. Booker T. Coleman, a.k.a. Kaba Hiawatha Kamene, scholar, educator, and author. He will be joining us momentarily, so let's give him a wonderful welcome as he makes his way here as well. All right. So, with that being said, family, there is a format and a structure to our panel discussion for today, and it's really going to be broken down into 3 basic parts. So, the first part, and just to put out there again, so you can keep it on the forefront of your mind, our theme for today is breaking the chains of psychological slavery, reclaiming our mind, body, and spirit. And so what's going to happen is each panelist is going to have up to 10 minutes to be able to give their own perspective from their research in the field, from their experience, from their studies, from what they have come across in their time being, whether they're a scholar or a practitioner or an activist or a healer or an educator or whatever you want to refer to them as. They're going to have 10 minutes to speak to, from their perspective, what is necessary and what it's going to take to be able to break the chains of psychological slavery and reclaiming our minds, bodies, and spirits. Or if they believe it can be accomplished or not. And so, one by one, they will have a chance to be able to give their presentation. And then after that, we'll have an intermission. And then there'll be questions by myself. I'll be serving as the moderator, facilitating the discussion and the dialogue for today. And then after that, for the third component and for the third part of our discussion today, we are going to allow the family, the audience, to be able to ask the questions that they may have. So before we move forward and hear from our panelists from their own mouths, just let me reiterate some ground rules. Shall we?
Yes.
All right. So what we do ask is, if we happen to disagree at any point in time, let us respectfully disagree. Let us respectfully disagree. Let us respect the person who has the floor. Sometimes, depending on the hot button topics or the controversial issues that may come up, we may get passionate. But if we could try to construct that into us being able to have a very effective dialogue and conversation, that will serve us all best. Also, if you happen to have a cell phone or a piece of technology, a gadget, a tablet, whatever you may have, if you could just double check it or triple check it and put it on mute, vibrate, or silent to make sure that nothing takes us off of being present and in the moment, so we can give the totality of our energies to our panel discussion for today. All right? We do ask if there is an answer to a question, all right? And this is for the panelists, and it's also, this is for the panelists. If there's an answer to a question, that we be mindful of the timing of our answer, so that way other panelists can be able to give their perspective and chime in if they have a perspective to lend as well, too. And for those who may have questions, and I'll reiterate this when we get to this portion in time, we do ask for you to have concise questions. We have 9 panelists. We don't need any more, family. All right? So with that being said, if you have a question, as I always like to say, frame your question in the form of a question. If you have a statement, frame your statement in the form of a question. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
You sure? All right. So nevertheless, each panelist at this time will have 10 minutes to give their presentation. All right? So, Mama Kenyatta, we could first start with you. And so you can go ahead and begin. And I know that you also have a tool as well there to facilitate what it is that you have to say to the family. So whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you.
When you ready to use that, I'm gonna have to plug that mic in for you.
Okay. Okay, sounds good. All right, good afternoon, everyone. How are you?
Good, great.
Thank you to everyone for allowing me the opportunity. Thank you to the Temple of Nat for allowing me to be here and to share with you. Before I begin, I just want to, again, pay homage to my ancestors, to my Ori, to the creative divine spirit that has brought forth this beautiful occasion and has allowed me to take part, and to the ancestors of the lineages into which I've been accepted. Before I speak, I just want to say that I also want to pay homage to the teachers, the elders, scholars, the priests, and the gurus who've imparted their wisdom and trust into me. I say thank you to them and acknowledge that nothing that I'm saying or doing here today is my own design alone, but rather a part of the collective consciousness that we all have and that is contained within creation itself. So I'm speaking, but I'm just a mouthpiece for the wisdom teachings that have been graciously imparted into me. And I want to especially thank Shaha Mfundishi Masi of the School of Heaven and Earth for carrying forth traditional wisdom teachings, that I'm going to share some of those today, and expertly contextualizing that as tools for personal and collective freedom and liberation. So with that said, I'll now continue. So many of you know me as the founder of Insaroma Academy for Holistic Thought. My work has been thus far focused on educating and uplifting the spirit of children. I also seek to do that primarily for women. The reason for my work is due to my understanding of what we all have, which is a purpose and a destiny. We are here in our personal incarnation this time around to achieve an objective. And that objective is imparted to us, of course, from a source way beyond our understanding. However, we are able to access that through real technologies. And so the work that I do is my vocation on this planet in this incarnation. When thinking about the question of breaking the chains of psychological slavery and how to reclaim it, it had me thinking about institutions, because I have been an institution builder. And one of the things that came to my consciousness was that the effects or the affects and the subsequent conditions of racism, of colonialism, of misogyny, of all these isms, all these pathologies, all the fear-based power structures that we see are a result of something that is culminated in the teachings that I've received, and it is bigger than and smaller than the institutions we're building. It is about the self. And so my work and my line of study and the work that I'm here to bring forth is about how we work within our own selves to be the community that we want, to have the institutions that we want, to bring about the changes that we want to see and have those changes manifest and last. So the thing is that we think about institutions as these brick and mortar structures, and what do we have and what are we providing, and we need more of this and more of that. And we keep finding ourselves kind of in a perpetual state of this isn't enough, or it's not being done well, or whatever the critiques are. But when we are not working with ourselves, we have more of the same. So we have church leaders who run churches while they're hiding their own vices, and thereby they're perpetuating their illnesses and their destruction. We have spiritual leaders who initiate people, but use that to control the minds of the people, the bodies, and the pocketbooks of the people. We have institution builders who seek wealth and they seek prosperity, and so they're further perpetuating capitalism, even within the African and African American community. And we have leaders who are driven by a desire for fame or power. And the thing that, in my humble awareness, these all have in common is that there's a challenge that we're having with cultivating our selfhood. And I'm not speaking of the selfhood that exists in the cultural monuments, which is a part of us, yes, but I'm talking about the internal cultivation that we tend to often skip over because it's the hardest work we will ever have to do. So everything that we see, everything that we complain about and contradict and say, well, we should have done it that way and it should have been that way, that is all external. And so what I'm talking about is the internal work. So even my work with children has been primarily that. I used to joke with people and say, Inseroma was a healing center for burgeoning like yogis who we disguised ourselves as a school so that people would bring their children, because we have to have something in order to have a place where we could foster what we needed within the minds and spirits of the children. And I'm going to repeat that: the mind and the spirit of the children, because that was what was most important about the mission of Inseroma. So I'm going to share. I'm going to go ahead and change to that. I want to just share this this drawing with you, this mandala. Yeah, this works. Oh, this is okay. Okay, we can bring this forward. So I hope you all can see this. Thank you, Baba. This is just one of the mandalas that we have brought forth by traditional wisdom. Thank you. And so here we have, outside of everything, is God, creative force. And then we have rungs. So we have the ancestral realm, the elders, the adults, the children. And this here is the seed. It's what in the Bakongo language we call mbungi. This is the space from which all things are created, so life itself. And so what we see is a responsibility. Everything above has responsibility to care for and cultivate everything below. And everything here is made better by that work, but then benefits what goes higher. So just if you think about the elders have had or should have received a certain level of wisdom to help our adults. Ooh, there should be an L there. Our adults do their work. And those adults will be well enough to then raise children who will then grow into adulthood and be a benefit to society and so on. And here, when children are cultivated or allowed to be themselves, to be their natural selves, how they come into the world, and thankfully I've had the opportunity to work with children in such a way, there is a light and an awareness that children have that if it is not squashed, they are touching back into the spirit realm, which is back encircling all of us and supporting us. So when we are doing our work and cultivating ourselves, our own individual selves, then we are doing our work to be what we need for each level that needs our support. And therefore, we send that energy back out into the space where we are then supported. So the ancestors, the creative force that is absolutely tasked with helping us, in order for it to be uplifted and increase our mind, body, spirit connection, we have to do our work internally. So there's so much more, but I'm going to honor the time. And thank you again.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, so we'll keep it going in that vein. We'll keep the momentum moving. So we can just start off from this side and work on to this side. So Baba Imhotep, you could go ahead and present how you see fit.
Peace and Hotep family.
Peace, brothers.
First and foremost, I'd like to give perfect praise to the great Oludamawe, Ptah, and Amma. I think it makes great sense as African people that we always acknowledge the ultimate source that gave birth to us. And I want to acknowledge those helpers, those laws, those principles that reside within us that we have as a genius African people have been able to project out. And we call them by many names. We say the Nediru, we say the Abosun, we say the Orisha. Those are laws that exist within us. And we come to understand how to access those principles and those laws, we can begin to change some of those things. So for those who may not know, my work principally is focused on culture. I would go to my grave advocating that African people must come into a deeper knowledge and an understanding of their culture. All areas of human interaction, human activity, whether it's external or internal, is fundamentally linked to culture. When we talk about psychology, you're talking about culture. The psychology of a people is naturally impacted, affected, and affected by culture. And so when we begin to talk about psychological slavery, we're talking about a phenomenon of culture. Because the only way you can enslave a people is through dominating of their people. And the way you perpetuate the domination is by getting the people to understand something about you that they don't understand about themselves. So essentially, it's through socialization. So it's the institutions that the dominated force establishes that they put the dominated people through that allow the dominated people become subservient and perpetual servants of those who have dominated them. So if psychological slavery is to be reversed, if it is to be eradicated, it has to be done at a cultural level. And this is not going to happen overnight. So oftentimes we get into this struggle about what should we be doing first because of the drastic nature that we are under as a people. And so we have these pressures that are pushing upon us, and we really want to get out this mess. So we're trying to figure out what's best, what should we do, what should we do? Whether it's economics, whether it's education, whether it's relationships, whether it's politics, if you want to use that terminology, whether it's agriculture, whether it's technology, you essentially are talking about culture. In all those areas, all of that is culture. But the way in which we practice in those areas is what's jamming us up. Our idea of economics is Europeans' ideas of economics. That's the problem. We're not thinking about economics from an African standpoint because we don't understand African culture. Our socialization systems are European socialization systems. And that's the reason why we have the problems that we have in terms of relationship building, family structures. Our family structures are their family structures. So essentially everything that we do, everything that we perpetuate is them. And because we're trying to live as them, not knowing we're trying to live as them, it's complicating us. So we are complicated in terms of knowing who we are. So it gets back to the fundamental question that the mama just spoke of, the essential selfhood. We have to come to understand who we are at a basic fundamental level from an African standpoint, which from my understanding is a divine standpoint, because the Africanity that resides in us is the first principle that gives birth to all things in existence. So we are existence. There is no existence before us. We give birth to God, if you want to come to understand on a deeper level. It's only through us that you come to understand what it is to be God. It's only through our eyes and our experiences that we come to know the true meaning of what it is to be God. So when we talk about Oludumare, when we talk about Ptah, when we talk about Amma, we're talking about an essential element, an essential principle, an essential source that births everything in existence that we are. Because before us, there is any. But we have been derailed. There are a number of terminologies that we use to speak about this derailment. Dr. Wade Noble's called the culture derailment. Dr. Kobe Kambon speaks about a culture misorientation. We have these issues that are fundamentally linked to culture. And oftentimes when you hear this word culture, I know it's a broad terminology, and we tend to get stuck with trying to understand that. That's a deeper conversation that we have to have as a people to come to understand what culture means in the African concept for African people. So very briefly, I will try to give a definition just for conversation's sake. But don't take this at face value because culture is deeper than what I'm going to say right now. In a very simplistic way, think of culture as being the totality of the human interactions of a people. And the way human beings interact from a local standpoint have been dictated, defined, categorized, and codified by their ancestors. Each people have an ancestral way of how they are to be, because within that ancestral way, you are allowed to maximize who you are through self-actualization. And self-actualization comes by way of cultivating your inherent selfhood. Your inherent selfhood. But the reason why it's so hard for us to cultivate and maximize self is because we have, on a basic level, we have bought into the idea of trying to do it individually. That is a fundamental flaw. Because the African biology, the African ecology, the African spiritual essence is birthed out of communalism, is birthed out of congregation, is birthed out togetherness. That's who we are. But because we have been put through so much damage in this land and never dealt with the damage, and in turn we've damaged one another, we no longer want to be amongst each other. And that perpetuates their dominance. Us not wanting to be able to deal with each other perpetuate the mess that we in. Because we'll never come out this mess individually. I don't care how much money we get. Because who we are inherently collective. I am we. Ubuntu. That's who we are. Us understanding and recognizing the human dignity that resides within African people is at the essence of what it means to be African. And we'll never defeat people who are spiritless if we don't take spirit into the battle. We'll never beat them on their battlefield. We have to come to know what it means to be African. And part of being African is to be spirit. Everything about us is spirit. We walk spiritually, we dance spiritually, we have sex spiritually, we sing spiritually, we eat spiritually. That's what makes us who we are. Our spirituality go where we go. We don't leave it in a building. We don't pick it up on a Sunday. We don't pick it up on a Tuesday. It's who we are. We are inherently spiritual. And what I mean by that, inherently spiritual, mean that we are naturally attuned to that which gives birth to everything. But we have to come to understand it through culture. We got to come to understand it through culture. And a lot of times we say things like, well, but we've been reading for too long. I'm tired of reading books. We have to study because something has been done to us that we don't want to recognize. Something has been done to us. We talk about elders. We talk about mamas or babas. We use these terminologies. Elders understand the cultural way. And the elders prepare the adults, as the mama talked about, prepare the mamas and the babas to do their work. And we have individuals who have not dealt with the contradiction that this society have conditioned within us, that's trying to develop other human beings. We reproduce mayhem and destruction. And that's why our organizations are falling apart. We get organizations with 3, 4, 5, 7 people, right? Because organization requires what? Socialization. That's why our relationships are falling apart. Why? Because we are broken and we're not dealing with that. Because we're trying to take these European ways and being into African areas of human interaction. We have to study, family. There's no way around that. We have to study because we have been removed from who we are. We got to study. We got to come to understand what it means to be African. Whether you call yourself African or not, you are. You have to come to understand what it means to be that, and we got to act on that consistently. Peace.
Imhotep.
Imhotep.
Imhotep family. All right, that was great, brother, sister. I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight. And so I come and I look at things from since I do martial arts, I always look from things from a point of warfare. You see, you say psychological slavery. So I say to myself, like Harriet Tubman said, if they only knew they were slaves, I could have freed more, right? If they only knew they were slaves. So if we only knew that we were in a war, you see, we can fight a war. But most of us believe that everything's dandy. Like Malcolm X said, we can go to the bathroom now, we can eat what they eat. You see what I'm saying? We think everything is dandy. But we have to understand that psychological warfare, I like to say, is deep. That our people, we have to always remember our rituals, okay? We did rituals in here today. You see, we have to tell our children, and I work with children. I love working with children because children has an open mind. I'm not saying nothing about elders in here, but sometimes elders get into the way and they set. But children, you can mold them. You understand what I'm saying? So children, I'm saying to everybody, get your children, talk to your children, and don't let them forget who they are. So they have an image out here of our children that is really, disturbing. And it even having us believing that. You see, right here on our block, it's busy. It's busy. We have about, let's say 15, 20 people that's on this block. They work. They come out here every day. They do some type of work. You understand what I'm saying? And they deal this and do this, and deals be gone. So check this out. All of a sudden, we'll say that this is a bad area for 15 people. You see what I'm saying? 15 people make a whole community bad. You see? So we have to, in our mind, change the way we think. Our children are not little bums, what they call them, everything, thugs. You see what I'm saying? So if we believe what they say, they become that. You see? The media, the sister talked about understanding. And that's powerful because we have to understand the power which we have. I'm a martial arts instructor, and I deal with karate and now the internal arts. The internal arts mean that you go inside, tap into yourself, heal yourself. So this is what we have to do with ourselves. Tap into our inner self of that ancestors. And then, yeah, you hear our people always say, man, y'all always talk about ancestors. Getting tired of y'all talking about ancestors. We the only one talk about ancestors. We need to get over it. But nah, see, psychological warfare have you thinking that. If you look in your pockets right now, you got a lot of ancestors in there. Hopefully, you see what I'm saying? Meaning if you got dollar bills in your pocket, those are ancestors. If you go to a museum, they show the ancestors, but they might label it different. Excuse me. They might label it different, but it's the same thing. We have to always remember, go back, Sankofa. Go back and tap into the forces that we have, because they use the forces that we taught them in alchemy. They use the forces we taught them in chemistry. They use the forces of fire. They use the forces of air, sulfur. You see, because they know how to use it. And we think it's just nothing. I challenge everybody tonight. Excuse me, I've been up since 4 o'clock this morning, and talking. I'm a barber, so I'm talking all day. But what I'm saying is that look at the show called Brain Games. Brain Games is a very heavy show because they're going to tell you at the end of the show what color you picked, what you were thinking about, etc. You get me? So if they can do that with a show, they sure enough can do that with your actions. They know, like we saying here, what mind or what are you thinking, your thoughts or somebody else's thoughts? Most of the time, we're thinking somebody else's thoughts. Ashe? And with that is, I always come back to the image of our children, the image of yourself. You have to change. We have to change that. You see what I'm saying? We have to grab the little children, those who, don't talk about Johnny if you're not going to help them. Because, see, you help them, yeah, that. You see what I'm saying? Because you adding to the fire. We must love ourselves. See, LOVE, come back to yourself. Go internal in yourself. And as far as healing, the sister spoke about, again, the forces we have inside of us. Learn how to tap into yourself, your internal self. Learn how to love yourself, for real. And you see what I'm saying? So only when you can love yourself, you can help somebody else. Because if you really don't like yourself, how can you like anybody else? How can you teach somebody else? You see what I'm saying? So that's what we got to do. Ashe?
So next we have Ishmael Murry, and give us a few moments. We're going to get this presentation all squared away here, so you can be able to.
Peace and power, everyone.
Peace.
Giving all honor to the Creator and to our ancestors, especially to our Creator, if you call him Allah, God, Yehovah, Olodumare. We want to give honor and praise. And also definitely to our ancestors who came and make the way for us. I'm going to talk about this topic and pepper it kind of like from a health standpoint. And I kind of look at it from the point of view that in order for us to reclaim our minds, bodies, and spirits, we have to do it with a terminology or a coin phrase that someone came up with and many years ago called taking back the power to define. Taking back the power to define. So we have now arrived in a time in history when men who stand for truth must manifest the spiritual courage to re-examine and redefine all things according to how it fits our culture and our national identity, not the adversary's identity and cultural paradigm. We must question every facet of existence under this current Euro-Gentile dominion. This includes the politics, the education, the business, the way we dress, the health and wellness. This tool, the tool by which we as a people will reclaim our minds, bodies, and spirits is to reclaim the power to define. So for the past 430 years, we have been overexposed to lies and liars, which have resulted in ill health mentally, spiritually, economically, and we have not only been eating the wrong foods, but we're digesting deception and lies. Now, what is the power to define? The power to define is the ability to discern and the will to interpret and implement ideas and philosophies in order to be totally victorious in the battle against one's enemy. It is essentially spiritual warfare. So we are in spiritual warfare. The power to define means we define for ourselves, we name for ourselves, and we therefore control our own destinies. Someone else is not controlling our destiny. We take back the power to define. We no longer use the Euro-Gentiles definition and measuring rods for success and failure. Now, this process is not just going to happen overnight. It's going to take a few courageous and strong brothers and sisters to come together to make this happen. So let's talk about what happens when we put this power in the hands of our enemies. Our adversaries have defined for us that a white coat wearing MD has your best interests at heart when it comes to your health, and that a herbalist or grandma's remedies is quackery. And I have patients to come in and tell me about how many pills their parents have on their desk and how many pharmaceuticals they're taking. That's because we have accepted their value system and their power to define what is health. They told us that Africa is a land of poverty and ignorance and backwardness. Yes, the Chinese are all over Africa. Okay? And America is the promised land where we find our young brothers and sisters getting gunned down, is the so-called promised land. The adversaries have told us that pharmaceuticals with all the many side effects is true medicine, and that grandma's remedies are ineffective. The adversary has defined for us that having it your own way at Burger King and Colonel Sanders' finger-licking good is healthy and will yield you life, right? They told you that eat whatever you want because you're going to die from something anyway. The adversary has used the power to define as a weapon to keep us in mental bondage. Right is wrong and wrong is right. So Ebony magazine came out with an article not too long ago about two gentlemen, Oliver and Rashad, the new marriage paradigm. And Oliver said that Rashad balances him out in many ways, right? The adversary has taken away your ability to even think for yourself. He's designed poor diets to create a poor people in mind, body. We specifically have been targeted for passive genocide through our diet, which the adversary defines for you with confusion. Solutions, because I just don't want to identify problems. How many minutes, brother? 3? 5, okay. First, we must petition the Creator and our ancestors for guidance and ask them to guide our plans. We should begin the process of starting to eat a plant-based diet. I will tell you this from experience, that people who have gone on a plant-based diet have been able to reverse such diseases as heart disease and diabetes. Yet the doctors will tell you can eat anything you want. Create preventative medicine community centers to train practitioners and holistic educators so that we can re-educate our people about how to eat to live and how to change this paradigm so they don't end up like my mother who died in 2009 with 28 pills, right, on the dining room table. Encourage your sons and daughters to enroll in entrepreneurship programs. study mechanical engineering, agricultural engineering. We basically need to start learning how to farm again. We are too much into service industries. We need to, I'm serious, we need to start learning how to grow our own food. If there had a riot in Baltimore today and the National Guard blocked off all areas, how would you get food? How would you get food? So we need to start to create organic community farms or buy farms. There's opportunities for us to go into Africa, to Kenya, to Ghana, in different areas so that we can begin the process. We can start creating farming or organic farming situations here in America for those of you who want to stay. This is what will happen if we don't take back the power to define good health. 2010, African Americans were 30% more likely to die from heart disease than non-Hispanics. African Americans represent 13% of the U.S. population, which accounts for 44% of HIV infections. African Americans are almost twice as likely to be diagnosed with diabetes than non-Hispanic whites. And African Americans have the highest mortality rate of any racial and ethnic group for all cancers combined, and for the most major cancers. Death rates for all major causes of cancers are higher for African Americans than for whites, contributing in part to lower life expectancy for both African American men and African American women. If we don't take back the power to define in all aspects of life, including our health, we're going to end up doomed.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Yes, my name is David Murphy. I published this newspaper, the National Black Unity News. I also am a member of a group called Black Men Unifying Black Men. I'm also on the board of Maryland Council of Elders. And first, before I get into what I have to say, I want to thank Brother Dennis Winkler and Brother Sankofa for the wonderful works that they've done. You know, I watched these brothers way back in the day, even though they're young men. I've seen the growth that you brothers taken, and I appreciate you. Keep up the good work, sir. But I want to take you on a journey, on my journey. That's why I'm an expert in David Murphy. Now, you know, I was taught about a lot of things. You know, I've been to school for this, I've been there, and I've done that. But one thing, you know, I think that we all need to start looking at, and I heard it mentioned here several times already, we need to look within. You know, I published this publication. I'm going to take, as I said before, I'm going to take you on a journey. I asked myself, I want you to start asking yourself some questions. I asked myself one day, because I'm very inquisitive, I say, why do I do this? What is the purpose of this? And I come up with the basic information. Well, I want to help people, I want to help my people, the normal stuff we normally say. But then I asked myself again, why do I want to help people? Then I went on this thing, it's a survey, I want you all to take heed to this, I want you all to try this. It's going to take you on a psychological journey. And it's called the 7 levels of why. Yep. Ask yourself why you do this and why you do that, and then you keep going down to 7 different levels. You know, when I went on this journey, it took me to such an emotional roller coaster. I'm a strong black man, but it had me broke down. I cried like a little baby because I discovered a lot of things about David Murphy that I kind of hidden in my subconscious mind somewhere. And when I started asking myself why from the newspaper, by the time I got to the 4th level, 5th level, I was at that time on my 4th level, almost became a mass murderer. I was going to kill a whole group of people. I was angry, extremely angry, for what they'd done to me, my people. And I was acting out the only way I knew how to act at that particular time. But then when I got to my 5th and 6th level, it took me on a shocking journey. You see, I published a newspaper, but do you know I have a 7th grade education? I dropped out in the 7th grade. And you know why? Because on my 5th and 6th level, I discovered why. You see, when I was 4 or 5 years old, my mother took me to school, first day. There's a school used to be up on North Avenue where Coppin sits at. And it only had a kindergarten and the first grade there. And my mother took me there to this strange place. That's the first time I've ever been away from home by myself. I had 7 or 8 brothers, siblings. So I always had somebody with me. So she left me in this strange place with these strange children. And she went back across North Avenue and went home. 10 minutes later, I was knocking at the door. I got up and left, and put my life in danger, went across North Avenue. And my mother approached me, said, "What you doing here?" And she said she's gonna take me back to school. That's the first time I ever defied my mother. And of course, back in them days, when you defied your parents, you got it. That's the first time I recall her whipping me. You know, you actually get spanked on the hands and all that for little naughty things, but this is the first time she whipped me. And she took me back to that place. I stood there. And then a few months later, see, back in my day, most of those who are older may remember this. I'm 67. So I'm talking about back in 1956 and 57. You see, in media, keep in mind I'm in media. Back in those days, we didn't have black radio stations. We didn't have, matter of fact, the only music that we heard was predominantly Caucasian music. The Pat Boones and Elvis Presleys. Every once in a while, you might hear a Nat King Cole, somebody like that. But as a child, I used to listen to the radio, and I loved music, loved it. And I used to always think of myself, I'm going to be the greatest singer in the world. So back in this school again, I'm taking you back to the school again. Here where I'm in the kindergarten, and they used to have a thing called nap times. You used to lay your head down on the desk. And all of a sudden, for some reason, I don't know why, I broke out in a song, singing Elvis Presley, "Don't Be Cruel." That particular song has significance to it. But the teacher told me to shut up. And the children started laughing at me. Guess what? And from that day forward, I became an introvert. You talking about psychological damage. And because those children laughed at me, this lasted all the way up to adulthood. And this is another reason why I do this paper, because this is another way for me to express myself outwardly. But even further than that, when I got to my 6th level, I used to have a childhood hero. Back in the day, children used to watch cartoons a lot. And they had this character named Mighty Mouse. And Mighty Mouse was a bad little mouse. He was strong, he could fly, he had a cape. And he used to beat up cats all the time. You know, just whip them. And at the end of the show, he'd always get the woman, the girls. He would pick them up and fly off in the sunset. And that was my favorite character. I wanted to be Mighty Mouse. And then I asked myself on my 7th level, why in the world would I want to be a mouse? Seriously. I thought like a child. But but see, back in them days, I know y'all heard what they call that stuff, that big bird on it and all that. A lot of children watch that show. Come on. Sesame Street. Yeah. But back in our day, we had a thing called, what they call that, the Musketeers, whatever they call it. Not three. They had the Mickey Mouse Club, yeah. Right. And they had these little children on it. They're from age 4 to 5 all the way up to 16, I believe. And I had a brother younger than me, he's 4 and I'm 5. And we used to fight. This is on my 7th level. And they had a little boy our age on there. He was a little white boy named Cubby. And we used to fight, "I'm Cubby, no, I'm Cubby." We fight over that. And then I asked myself on my last level, why in the world would I want to be a little white boy? Then it finally dawned on me. And it hits me like I get emotional about this. You know why? Because I didn't see people like myself in media. Of course. The only 2 people I ever saw on television was Stephen Fletcher and Kingfish in this. And they weren't too many people you want to idolize, But when I went on that journey, you talking about what this subject matter is, all of them things added up to what I do today. And see, ladies and gentlemen, when I found out the truth of why I do the things that I do, then I broke free from a lot of things. See, now I'm able to move on. I know why I'm fighting this battle. I know why it's almost like predestination, why I do the things that I do today. Because I had to go through it, and I've been through it. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you this, especially to you young folks. It's good to look out. It's good to get all the education you can. But the battle, true battle, lies within. Because when you make up your mind within yourself, you can be anything you want to be. When I was talking about singing, I can sing today. It took 50, 60 years for me to start singing again. What kind of all them years of loss? I could have been the greatest singer in the world. I could have been a lot. Why did I choose print media? I could have spoken on television. I could have spoken on other media forms. Because those psychological damages, because what somebody said and how I perceived it. That's why it's so important to have schools. That's why it's so important to have media. Because we own less than 1% of the media. So 99% of the information that you get in today, ladies and gentlemen, is coming from outside resources. Psychologically, they tell you, they use propaganda on you every day. Every day. And if we don't support our media, you're going to keep on getting what you're getting, and we're going to stay in the same situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Thank you. And we also want to welcome Kaba Kamene, who's just arrived and who completes our panel discussion. So give it up for him. And his beloved queen that is with him as well, Ashe. All right. So next up we have Dr. Gregory. Give us one moment as we get his...
Good afternoon, folks. Is that better?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I thought it was radioactive for a minute. Okay. Cool. So, this is nice. This is nice. We're hearing more and more about what our condition is. So I just want to, I'm not even going to go over all of this, but there's a couple things I want to go to some healing prescriptions and some solutions. But first I want to say that we all are energy. Whether we call it, in the Vedic tradition they call it prana, in the East they call it chi, and in the Bantu of Central Africa we call it NTU. Everything is energy, from this to this. And our energy fluctuates according to how we treat it. You remember what the physicist said, you know, earlier? I didn't do well in physics in school, but I remember one thing. They said energy can neither be created nor destroyed. All it does is changes form. So how it changes depends on how we treat ourselves. How we treat ourselves. And there are a lot of forces out there that are trying to control our minds. There are a lot of forces that are out there that are trying to make decisions for us about how we will be and what we will do. So, in order to take care of ourselves, at some level we have to discipline our minds. So the mind can rationalize, justify, or defend whatever one wants to do. The mind is a trickster. Without proper discipline, it can drag one into all sorts of unhealthy, unpleasant, unsafe circumstances. Can I get an amen? Amen. we all been there, you know. The mind can fool. You think you're doing one thing, you're doing something else. You think you're dancing to one tune, and you're dancing to somebody else's tune. That's why it's important that each one, everybody's been saying it, from the inside out, we have to heal ourselves, direct ourselves. We have to decide how we're going to nurture and feed our minds. Because the undisciplined mind can be very easily manipulated, controlled, and programmed by external forces. So, real quickly, a couple things that we can do to take care of ourselves. The first is develop an awareness of our programming. We all have been programmed. All of it's not bad, by our families, by our education systems, by the society we live in, our religious institutions, by the things we read, watch on TV. We have been programmed. The mind, there's really not that much free thought going on. The mind is, the conscious mind is only 10 to 15% of the mind. The other 85% is all the programming. It's like we're on automatic, on default. And somebody does a certain thing to us, we respond in a certain way because that's how we're programmed. We're programmed by our families, our institutions, our experience, all of that. The more aware we are of how we're programmed, the more options we have. Awareness creates options. When we realize we're programmed, we can make a decision of what we're going to do with that programming, where we're going to break the cycle, if the cycle is positive, if it's negative. So the first thing is to check out and do some honest assessment. Brothers talking about some self-reflection to figure out, the question is, how's that working for you? You know? I got a certain way of doing things. I got a certain way of getting my feelings about certain things. I approach stuff. How is that working for you? Some honest assessment. And if it don't get uncomfortable, it's probably not real, okay? Then the second part is learning how to monitor one's thoughts and feelings. To monitor one's thoughts and feelings. Now, straight up, if we look at our Eurocentric orientation makes us think that thoughts are superior. But we're people of feelings. And feelings are older than thoughts. Even plants and animals feel. As one of my mentors say, feelings are messengers. And so one of the things we need to do is learn how to monitor and receive our feelings. Because we spend a lot of time in the society pushing back, trying to block them off, trying not to experience them like that. Okay, so we let those messages come in. And then we also want to develop focus. Now, we're so overstimulated in the society, we're all over the place. Between the average person in every day sees 2,000 commercials. On your phone, driving down the street, that's 2,000 sophisticated attempts to control your mind, right? So it's this making a decision about what I'm going to focus on. And the truth of the matter is you can only focus on one thing at a time. That's right. You know, the mind can move rapidly, but can only do one thing at a time. So we need to make intelligent decisions about what I'm going to focus on right now. Number 3, feed your mind. Feed your mind. Decide what goes in, because whatever goes in is going to come out some kind of way. So make an intelligent, intentional decision about what I watch, what I read, even who I talk to, what I will engage in, because if it's going in, it's going to come out. We've all been there when stuff starts jumping out. You say, where'd that come from? Something we let in. Something we let in. Then, self-discipline. It behooves each one of us to decide for ourselves what disciplines I'm going to have. The Sufis say, when it talks about power, they say there's only one power, it's willpower. Willpower is developed whenever you do what you say you're going to do and not do what you say you're not going to do. And you can start small and build up that capacity. But it's critically important because there's 6 passions that try to sabotage us all the time. 6 passions. Lust, anger, greed, pride, envy, and attachment. Lust, anger, greed, pride, envy, and attachment. So at some level, we have to learn to say no. And if you can't say no to yourself, it's harder to say it to other folks. But that's what discipline is, just to say what I'm going to do and what I'm not going to do. Then the other one I'm recommending is learn to listen. Life is talking to each one of us all the time, sending us messages. When we're tuned in, how many times we say, oh, I should have listened. We miss the message. But when we focus on it, when we're open, when we're centered, when we learn how to be still inside, then we receive those messages more often. Because it's not the enemy out there that causes us the most harm. It's the enemy inside here. It's the enemy inside here. And the last one is once you get the messages, is submit to the messages. Submit to them. And all of this takes practice. Anything you practice, you get better at. Anything you practice. Real simple. This is a little format that some of us developed, were given and added on to a little while ago. 7 steps. First, no fault finding. Look for what is happening, not what isn't happening. With yourself to begin with, and then in the world. There's a lot of positive stuff happening in the world, but that's not the focus of the general media. Single pointedness, one thing at a time. This thing of multitasking, one thing at it doesn't work. One thing at a time. 3, discrimination. Let me rely on and trust my power of discrimination. My power to decide what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, what's working, what's not working, and be consistent with that. And 4 is non-attachment. Not be attached to the results of what I do. I'm going to do the right thing, and whatever comes out of that is what comes out of that. If that's 27 years in prison or whatever comes out of that is what the Creator has for me, and that's my mission. So that non-attachment, that's a big, and that goes against where society is right now, because society is beeping so hard on this outcomes thing. That's a trap. If you have a healthy process, you're going to get the best results. And keep it simple. Think something good, say something good, do something good. Ashe? Blessings.
Thank you, Dr. Gregory. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so we have Kaba Hiawatha Kamene, also known as Booker T. Coleman. So at this time, you have your 10 minutes.
10 minutes? Yes. Wow. To cover billions of years in 10 minutes. Hotep family. First, I thank my brother Sankofa, who was my first original contact to be able to come here and share this time with my family in a place I call Talmeri. Maryland, I call it Talmeri. And to Brother Ausar, who has arranged this to happen, and to all of you who have come in attendance, one of the things that I value is time. Time is probably the most precious thing that we have. If you had a person who was elder, that had all the money and shoes and everything in the world, and you said, I could give you one thing, he or she would probably say, give me just a little bit more time. Time is very precious, and how we use it is very important to us. And so I appreciate you taking this time out of your Saturday to be here. And I respect what it is that's going on here at the new temple of African thought. And this is something that we have to start to do. And I also recognize my brothers and my sisters who I have a chance to share this panel with. One of the things I just want to begin with, because we have 10 minutes. It's not a lot of time, but when you gather all the information that has been shared, just since I've come in, the last 2 speakers, so I can only imagine what everything combined is. And so I thank all of us for making this possible. But when you think about the conditions we find ourselves in as a people of African descent, with all of the trials and tribulations we've been through, you also have to have a phenomenal amount of respect and admiration for each and every one of us. Because if you are of African descent in America in 2018, I got nothing but love for you. Because you have to understand what we have been through transgenerationally and intergenerationally, and the pain that we have suffered over the years, and yet we're still here. That's to be celebrated. Understanding the pain, but also understanding that what didn't kill us made us stronger. And they're still trying to figure out what it is that is in us that keeps us doing what we're doing. So I celebrate that. But as you go back in generations, just in terms of our minds and what we're experiencing, imagine being in a community where you have grown into. The people around you love you, they protect you, they make sure that everything that you need you get. You're used to the games that you play, you're used to the faces that you see, your friends, the foods that you eat, the languages that you speak, there's clear communication. And then all of a sudden, one day, someone who doesn't look like you, you have no idea anything about them, they come and they snatch you out of your community. And they take you across a land that you may not be familiar with. Only the best of the best could survive that. And then they take you someplace that you know not, and they put you down in a dungeon. You survived that. Only the best of the best could have survived that. And then they put you on a boat. And they take you to a place that you have no idea where you're going. Just that boat ride alone. See, that's why I'm not too much into cruises right now, because I remember the last time they told me that there was a boat ride for me. And they told me everybody had a job. So I don't go on them cruises no more. But only the best of the best could have survived that. Now, in between all that I'm saying to you, family, is all of the things that we went through in pain, humiliation, and torture. But only the best of the best could have survived that. And then they took us someplace with all the torture. We survived that. We then, for some reason, were dispatched. See, when we think about all of the unfortunate incidences that are happening to our brothers and sisters on the border, which is horrendous, what our children who are Spanish speaking, because they are our brothers and sisters, they are Africans, whether you're from El Salvador, Honduras, Belize, you're black. You may have been deprogrammed not to embrace it, but you're black. Dr. Clark said the only difference between us is a boat stop. But I say, what about us? What must that have been for us? If they have all these neuroscientists down there on the border examining what's happening to these children, talking about how they'll never be the same again for the rest of their life. What happens when it happens transgenerationally? What do we hand down to our children transgenerationally when that happens? But only the best of the best could have survived that. And then we're sold. The point that I'm making is that we are the product of the best of the best. And in order to make sure that we stay in our place, the forces beyond us are making sure that we never really figure out who we are. And they will do anything they can to make sure that we never figure out who they are. Now, my background is education. My first license in New York City was early childhood. I'm a kindergarten teacher. And so I could write a book on my 5-year-olds who would say to me in South Central Bronx, "You look like my daddy. I wish you were my daddy. Can I call you daddy?" To which all my response was, "I am your daddy. I didn't bring you in physically, but I am responsible for you once you're in my presence. I am your Baba." That is part of my mission. That's the part of all of our missions. That's an African tradition. But in order to, Dr. Naim Akbar, in his book, Know Thyself, talks about 3 steps of what has happened to us as a people. Because remember, when they snatched us out of our neighborhood, what they did is that they disconnected our neurons. The neurons that connected us to the foods that we ate, the people that we knew, the games that we played, the comfort level that we had, the trust level that we had. It separated us from that. However, deep in the kernels of what's called the GANs in the brain, there are those ancient memories. And those ancient memories is what gave birth to the temple of New African thought. It's what gave birth to the Black Panther Party and the New Black Panther Party. It's what gave birth to SNCC. So it's here, it's there, and it's in us. That memory is still there. So after they deprogrammed us, they then programmed us, which in the brain is called disassociation, which is separating us from our memories, and then reassociation. And now what we have to do as a people is to go back. Now here's what they do in the Board of Ed so we can understand. For those who are teachers, you know what happens. And I've taught every grade through my career of plus 40. I retired in, well, I call it graduation. I don't call it retire. I'm doing what I'm doing right here. This is what I was born to do. But my classroom was my classroom. That was my PhD in study of our people. And the reality that we face as we move through this process is the realization that from the very beginning, I'm going to start with school. What they do is that they begin to, the student learns how to read. So basically between pre-kindergarten, kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade, they have all these little cutesy programs where they show you bears and balloons and going to carnivals, and you're learning how to read, phonics, you're learning how to decipher, decode symbols, which for us is the English language. But somewhere in the 3rd grade going into the 4th grade, you no longer are learning how to read. You are now reading to learn. This is where they hit you with George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and all the great European physicists and scientists and mathematicians. They hit you with the fact that you are inferior and you should be happy that we took you from Africa because you have no background, you have no history. And that is where Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu wrote his book, where he talks about the 4th grade syndrome. And this is where the African mind rejects European knowledge and wisdom. So I want to be careful as I take my seat. I want to be careful what I'm about to say, because I want to put it within the context, and I know that learning is a game. I spoke to my children when I taught social studies 8th grade. They said, Brother Kaba, this is boring. I say, yeah, this is boring. They say, yeah, this is boring. I said, this is boring. Real boring. I said, well, multiply that by 10. That's how bored I am teaching you this nonsense. But let's play a game. There's a game that we have to play, because you have got to be able to move through this process, play the game, get out, and then do what you were born to do. But until we get to that point, we have to play this game. Children who fail tests really are succeeding as Africans. I want to be careful saying this now, because I don't want to give any child, Brother Kaba said I could fail and that's good. I'm not saying that. I'm saying play the game, but understand when you reject nonsense, that's intelligence. That's right. When you reject what doesn't include you, that's intelligence. And as I said, Carter G. Woodson said in Miseducation of the Negro, it took 30 years for him to undo the harm that Harvard University had done for him. We need to teach our own. We need to educate our own. We need to take on this responsibility for ourselves. Because in my experience, some of the most brilliant minds I have ever met have been in our classrooms. Some of the even more creative minds I've met have been in special ed. And many of those children in special ed who grow up and go to Rikers Island are some of the greatest geniuses and indigo people I've ever met in my life, which are sheer geniuses. But for as long as they can keep us thinking we are who we are, we will be in this position. We must assume responsibility for the education of our children, and that is why we are here. That is why we're doing what we're going to do, because all power belongs to the people. Hotep family.
Thank you, Kaba Kamene. And just for those who don't know, for tomorrow, day 2 of our NTU festival, he will be serving as our keynote speaker. So definitely come on out for those.
Hotep family.
Hotep.
Got to do this quick, brothers and sisters. First of all, I want to thank Brother Ausar, Brother Sankofa, Sister Naima, and Sister Camilla for bringing us together, and Brother Matu, and all those who've been very supportive in making sure this event goes off with the way that it has. Also, I want to say I'm happy to be a part of this panel right here, of the sisters and the brothers who are here, and I'm very happy to be here, and thank you again. But what I want to talk about, thank you, brother. My topic is violence, a power relationship between white aggression and black submission. But before I begin, let's take a reading from the Quran. For those that may not know me, my name is Ajamu Alil Kindije. That is my righteous name. My slave name is Max Tracy Ragland. Most of the people know me by Ali or Baba Ali. And I'm very happy to be here this afternoon to be a part of this prayer. I think it's very important. But I think one of the areas that we necessarily haven't talked about is violence. And I know it's not easy, an easy topic to talk about, but also I want to make clear, because I know there's some young minds present here, as well as some older minds present here. So I want to be very clear about what I'm saying. So I'm not advocating for anyone to go out there and do anything foolishly, but this is a discussion. So we have 7 levels of consciousness, and the first level is knowledge. So this is just sharing the knowledge with you. But I want you to take the knowledge, begin to think about it maybe, think about it differently as we begin to address this issue that we're facing. The theme is breaking the psychological chains of slavery. We're kind of paraphrasing it. But what are some things that we talked about? Education. We talked about culture. We talked about going within the self. But we think about whom we're dealing with. And we're dealing with the white man. We're dealing with the white male. The white male, in terms of power, is the most powerful human being upon the face of right now, in terms of power. Not that we don't have power, but he's utilizing his power. He's organized his power, he's institutionalized his power, and he's enforcing powers on us. He controls the world. Okay? A. Philip Randolph said that you don't belong at the table, you can't take a seat at the table. So we have to begin to think about it in terms of armed struggle. And that's when and the reason why I go into this is because one of the men that I learned from is a brother by the name of brother skipped my mind right now. Frantz Fanon. Frantz Fanon was a psychiatrist. You know, he studied medicine. He was born in the Caribbean. He treated soldiers during the French invasion in Algeria and became a freedom fighter. But one of the things that he did was in examining the soldiers was that the men who were affected by the colonization is that these men suffer from a neurosis. And neurosis came from the very fact because a lot of these men had submitted. They were not fighting against that. So one of the things that we do as parents, one of the things we teach our children is when they go to school, if somebody hits you, what? You hit them back. You stand up to a bully. I say this to my children, possibly you say it to your child. We say walk away if you can, don't start in trouble, but hit them back if they hit you. We teach this, but do we stand up as black men? They come to our communities, they beat our women, they beat our elderly, they beat our children, they beat us, they kill us, and what do? We don't fight back. So violence has to be a part of our discussion. We may not want to deal with that, but this is the reality that we're facing. Now, my background is psychology. I'm a licensed mental health therapist, have a doctorate in counseling psychology. But long before I even came there, I fought back. I'm originally from Alabama. I dealt with that beast every day of my life. I can remember the first time I was called a nigger, and I remember the last time I was called a nigger in the state of Alabama. Anniston, Alabama, right in between Birmingham and Atlanta. In 1961, the Freedom Riders coming from the north, coming down south, raising people to vote. That bus that was burned, Highway 202, that's my hometown. I remember Klan raids that passed out newspapers in my hometown. So I'm coming from a place of an aggression, but it's a controlled aggression. The brother named married Sister Makeba out of South Africa. Kwame Ture. Okay? One thing he said that we riot, but it's not organized. You know, it's just disorganized rioting. So when I talk about violence, I want to go through this. I don't have much time. As the Bible said about it, trying to put ours within 10 minutes very hard. Brother saying, which one do I click? The right arrow? Okay. So liberation is and will always be a violent phenomenon. It's the removal of an existing order and replacing it with a new order. It is not compromise, negotiation, or change, or sharing the values between the oppressed and the oppressed. The challenges facing African people in the 21st century is how do we as a collective community move from surrender to armed struggle? Okay? Now, the brothers talk about, many of us talked about, it's going to take some time. We're not talking about something that happened overnight because we didn't get overnight. The brothers talked about the psychology of the mind and how we have been conditioned to think a certain way, act a certain way. Make no mistake about it. It's not about negotiation with them. They have never negotiated. They came into the land and they slaughtered the Native Americans, the indigenous people, Africans who came out of us who was here. They go to the four corners of the world and they leave bodies everywhere. The brother out of California who wrote, skipping me right now, the brother who wrote many books, I can't think, it did come to me shortly, but he talked about, for people who always say they're in favor of life, you know, the political parties say that we're all about pro-life, but they slaughter people in the four corners of the world. So how are you pro-life? So, but it's coming to the brother Mike was a very interesting point. You said you're pro-life, but you destroy people in the four corners of the world. So what we're dealing with is not about, because one thing, keep in mind, with the oppressor, with the colonizer, the one thing they want, they want to remove everything that exists within you. Some of the other parents talked about this, your culture, your language, your history, your way of thinking, your practices. They want to remove that and replace that. Either you become white or they annihilate you. So many of us we are white men with black skin in terms of our thinking. That's something was done to us. None of us is immune to this. But some of us have realized this and begin to separate ourselves from this indoctrination. But it's going to take some time. You know, thousands of years. You know, we go back many times. We started dating from 1619 around, say, in Jamestown, Virginia. Many of us historians go back, but we talking about thousands of years when the first invaders came into Kamene. Began to transform now it wasn't overnight, but transformation, was it the Hyksos, the Persians, was it the Arabs? All of those people came in who removed something and replaced it with something. So by the time it got there, people was indoctrinated, man. So how do we get back to our natural self? And one of the things that Fernand talked about was violence. So I'm kind of go through this fast historical violence. And we know, I'm not going to go into the history right now, but bottom line is that the oppression that they subjected us to for over the 400 years, as the Bible clearly outlined, waking up in the morning, in the vision you was in, leaving and being kidnapped, and your wife was left there, not know if her husband going to return. That's trauma. Then the walk along the way to the dungeon was trauma. And we talked a little bit about trauma, a direct personal experience of event that involves actual threat to death or other threat to one's physical integrity. We know people who've been murdered. We know people who've been shot. We know people who've been stabbed. But we're talking about trauma in the sense that it's just witnessing, knowing about these things can cause trauma to the brain. And we talk about trauma to the brain is not dealt with. What happens is it's not organic, it's psychological. Because the stress of dealing with that trauma, whereas on the brain, begins to affect what? It begins to affect your prefrontal cortex. So as a people, that in trauma that we've been exposed to, they did something to us that prevented us from being able to fight back. There's evidence within that. So I want to go skip Michael Johnson. July 2016, into Dallas. Killed 5 police officers and wounded many. So the issue was, they were saying on the news he was mentally ill. He was not mentally ill. He was a sane brother. But he had reached a point, the same point he reached was the same point Nat Turner reached. The same point Harriet Tubman reached. The same point Dean Marvest reached, because he realized he wanted to free himself. He wanted to be free. And at that time, he exercised his right. So in July, I think it was July 7th and 8th, 2016, he became a free human being. Because he did what white men had been doing for centuries in this country, murdering at will. So he freed himself. He became a white male in black skin on July 7th, during that particular time frame. If we talk about the African mental health, I want to bypass, but how do we move from surrender to armed struggle? So this is the point we got to get into. See, I really want to get into it. I can't get into it like I want to right now. But I really want to get, because I really want to understand, because I'm leaving out a lot of bits and pieces. But how much time I got, brother? Clock ticking? About 2 minutes, okay. But the reason why it's very necessary, because when we talk about the psychological damage that was done to us, to the point that where we see the videos on TV, they had held the phones up, a little sister being beaten right there. You got grown men standing around. Stop doing that. Don't do that. You got people, nobody's helping her. Why? Because of the fear that's been placed within us that we won't even act on that. But see, that was damage that was done to us by their abusive behavior. We're not, it's the only way to come. Brother Fernand said this right here. Violence is a necessary remedy. It's a therapy to relieve yourself, because what happens when you begin to suppress that, you can't fight back. You can't say anything back. Who are you going to take it out on? I'm going to take it out on my brother right here. Because I can't take it out on him, but I've suppressed that year after year, week after week, month after month, day after day, and when it comes out, it's going to come out on him. Because it's suppression, and it got to come out at some point in time. But it don't come out, the person needs to come out on. So I'm saying there had to be points in times where we begin to build different types of structured institutions. I'm not talking about going to meet and going face, because we're nowhere near prepared to deal with them on the arms level. But we can't begin to train our minds, begin to place programs within the community, and begin to expand, begin to get larger. Because they have the CIA, that's a violent organization. Israel, the Mossad, that's a violent organization. KGB, that's a violent organization. So why do they have a violent organization? Because they understand the world that they live in and whom they're dealing with. But we think somehow we're going to come out from this without at least beginning to talk about this right here. Right. It's not going to happen, man, who we're dealing with. So I'm going to shut down right now. 10 minutes wasn't long enough. I want to get into, because we need to hear this right here. But for the sake of argument, I'll shut down. Peace, fam.
Thank you, Dr. Ragland. All right, so our last presentation, but certainly not the least, we have Brother Jared Ball. All right.
Thank you very much. Peace, everybody. Got my timer started, because I actually learned from Kwame Ture. He used to use timers when he spoke, being respectful for his time. First of all, I appreciate not only the event, everybody coming, my co-panelists, the topics, and I feel like what I was going to say was an unintended, unplanned extension of this previous, so it's flowing, I think, quite perfectly here. where I wanted to start was that any conversation about psychological slavery, I think we have to understand that psychological slavery cannot currently be broken because the process of enslavement has itself not been broken. So we are in no post-enslavement moment. We are in no post even physical or material form of enslavement. We are in just a rebranded or reformed version of it, which is why even going back to what, let me just back, I study media and I do, by profession, I study media and teach media communication studies. But I come at it very much as an activist, as someone who has studied many of the works and people involved in what was been discussed here. And I've come particularly to the study of media in the way that Fanon talked about it, that it is part of a polydimensional colonial method, that it is warfare, that media and communication and the founders of the field that I'm supposed to be professionally engaged in were very clear in their own writings and teachings that the field itself and the purpose of communication is for warfare. It is for violence in another form. So we can never look at, particularly in this context, as media as entertainment or anything other than an act of war. And it's been mentioned already, public relations, marketing, advertising, psychological warfare are all synonymous. They're all literally defined the same way by those who deploy them with slight variations. And even advertising, it was pointed out that how many commercials we suffer. That has been Marshall McLuhan, European scholar who Europeans suppress, himself said that advertising is a military operation. And we have to understand it that way, that the ability to make someone buy a hamburger or buy a car is no different than having Africans think that they're black or not African or disconnected from the rest of the universe. So when I look at the study of media, and Fanon talked about the polydimensional method, that colonization starts first with the act of violence, and then after you suppress the warriors, you engage in an act of basically psychological warfare to maintain order. And given that this is August, and we've just entered the month of August, I also wanted to quickly jump in and reference George Jackson and the tradition of Black August and political prisoners. And George has, for me, formed the basis as much as anyone of my own, again, approach to the study of media and anything else. In part because he said we need three things for revolution. One, we need an underground press that popularizes the idea of revolution. I think much of what you were talking about here in terms of popularizing even the idea of armed struggle has to be done. I mean, obviously we're not ready to engage in it, but we have to understand its role in history and understand its why it's been suppressed as a tool for people's liberation, and it's absolutely necessary. He also said that we need an army. George Jackson said we need a press to popularize revolution and the idea that we also need a secret army that's going to engage in various acts of guerrilla warfare and so on and so forth. I'm not advocating that. I just want to, as a scholar of sorts or someone who appreciates history, to be mindful and remind folks that George did exist. His books are still banned in prisons to this day. Reference to him by people like me is literally career threatening, and I won't bore you with it now, but literally just happened to me at Morgan State within the last year, specific to my work around George Jackson. At imixwhatilike.org, a website I run that's a shout out to Steve Biko. We did a video commemorative tribute to George Jackson, a video mixtape, that in an attempt to use media in this way and it caused nothing but trouble for me and my colleague at the time, and subsequently in terms of some of the work that we've tried to do, in part because of what George represents. And that's sort of what I also just wanted to say a little bit about, that there has to be a material component to this discussion, and that's sort of why I started with this idea that enslavement, we can't break psychological enslavement because the material process is still happening. The theft of our labor, the theft of our cultural production, the theft of our spirit is all happening literally right now. That's why we have materially less than we had, or we've benefited, we've improved not one bit in terms of our material relationship to the society from the time of enslavement to now. It has been rebranded, that is, of course, I'm not saying our conditions are the same, but it's been rebranded to play the same role to this day. That's why those who are empowered today have more of the global wealth, percentage of wealth now than they did at the height of enslavement. Similarly, that's why, Dr., one of the focuses of my work has been discussed here, Dr. Huey P. Newton, pointed out that the real definition of power is the ability to define phenomena and have it act in a desired manner. So if you can have Africans thinking that they are not Africans, they will act in a desired manner. And one of the reasons why we can't have the cultural flourishing that we need and the political and spiritual flourishing that we need is because materially the conditions aren't set for it. Thank you, man. Thank you. And I do agree that as much as we are spiritual, spirit is as much a product of the natural material environment. That's why the African environment produced the worldview that we had up until we were made crabs in a barrel and forced to behave as crabs in a barrel. Similarly, I just wanted to say a couple other things about propaganda and media that I think that I've just wanted to become more aggressive in arguing. And I'll start by just saying that I wanted to develop what I'm calling the Vernon philosophy of media inattention or avoidance, AKA the Carlos Cook's view of media relations. And what I mean by that is my man Vernon is the brother I used to deliver pizzas with 25 years ago. And he said to me one night after work, and he said, I'm never going to another movie that has any of our people in it. And at the time, I was like, how could you say that? I mean, how are you not going to see the latest whatever, whatever, whatever? And he said, because every time we're depicted negatively. And worse, he even said, Prescient, before I've even got into a study, and we were just delivering pizza and washing dishes, he said that the impact of the supposed positive depiction or participation in popular media has a deleterious or more harmful impact on us collectively. That is, our assumed participation in something big, aka Black Panther or Barack Obama as president or whatever the latest Tyler Perry, Ava DuVernay, Hollywood production with black people in it is. Because of the appearance of inclusion, it divorces us further from the fact that we need to be in more conflict with the state. And we can't keep looking for it. So as Carlos Cook once years and years ago back in New York said, his work could not be covered by the press. Much different than we often do today. He said no press can cover our work because you won't cover it correctly. You'll give an undue light to the work that we're doing. And it will have a negative impact on the work that we're trying to do to rebuild our community. So, 1 minute. So, you said 3? Oh man, my bad. Sorry, my glasses are going. So I think that we need to be. So I think that we do need to be more hostile and understand that there is a direct one-to-one relationship between the promotion of symbolism or misrepresentation of us symbolically and the devolution of our material conditions. That there is a one-to-one relationship between the popularity of a Marvel, Disney, Black Panther film and a decrease in the wealth or the share of wealth that we have as Africans on the continent or throughout the entire world, even in this country. There is this, and it's described in a book that came out last year as national security cinema. That the state has been highly involved, more than most scholars are even aware, because the state has shut down scholarship on the very subject of the role that the NSA, the DOD, the Pentagon, the CIA have played in films and television scripts. There's a reason why you can turn on Homeland last year and see them use literally the exact same language that's used in discussions of American politics on MSNBC and CNN, because the scripts are literally delivered by the same people to the same places to create this veneer nationally and internationally that the state is legit, that policing is legit, that the CIA and et cetera are legit, even as many of us should know better from the work that we're involved in and the histories that we represent and the struggles that we are looking to extend. So just as propaganda is a more than $500 to $600 billion global business, we have to understand that there is a tremendous amount of effort into manipulating public opinion in our consciousness. And I think we need to be more aggressive in resisting it so that we can do the real work that needs to be done to engage the political struggle, to engage the material struggle as it needs to be engaged in this country and in this world, so that we can create the space that leads to the cultural, spiritual, etc. uplift and expansion. And then that would also, by the way, lead us to the very necessary discussions of how we get there. And we're not going to get there without at some point some sort of material, physical conflict. And unfortunately, we're nowhere in where we need to be in preparation for that, in large part because of the media environment that has been created and so on. And there's my time. Time's Up by OC, hip-hop reference for those, man. Anyway.
Thank you very much. So, fam, let's give it up for all of our panelists today who gave their opening presentations. and the wisdom, the hard work, the insight, the research that they had to present to everybody here today. So we're going to do a short intermission for 5 minutes.
It's the business of life, the business of love, the business of health, the business of wealth. It's the business of principle, the business of media, the business of conscious, the black business network, life, the business of love, the business of health, the business of wealth. It's the business of principle, the business of media, the business of conscious, the black business network, life, the business of love, the business of health, the business of wealth. It's the business of